In this video, I'm going to take you through a quick flip through of my 2023 Artful August sketchbook. If you'd like to stick around at the end, I'll explain a little bit more of my process and how it compares to last year's Artful August sketchbook. So Artful August this year was based on jewel tones. So all of the colors are jewel tones, and each week I just did the weekdays only. So you'll see there's not that many entries because each week only had either 4 or 5 days. Week 1 started with ruby red, so all of my entries are based on ruby red. And then it moved into week 2 for citrine yellow. And for citrine yellow, it really made me gravitate a lot more towards the earthy brown-ish yellows rather than lemon yellow. Week 3 was sapphire blue. And it's funny because I started with a blue that wasn't quite sapphire in my mind, and I quickly corrected and went back towards something that felt more sapphire to me. I then moved to week 4, which was emerald green. Emerald green really makes me think of Viridian, so there were a lot of those kinds of colors. And then lastly, week 5, which is only a 4-day week, was amethyst purple. I had my son help me with this one, and I skipped I think a day of this week, and that's okay. This was Artful August, and it's so interesting to look at how quick this book was to flip through and how seemingly little entries there are, but how quickly the month passed, even though it might seem daunting to create every single day. And I didn't create every single day. I skipped a few days here and there. The weekends were not created. I didn't create on the weekends. And so it's really interesting how an entire month can pass by. And when you think about creating for an entire month every single day, it sounds daunting. But if you just break it down into maybe even just a few days a week, you can actually fill a sketchbook and you can get through it and you can create a variety of work. If you're here to listen a little bit more about some of my process and what I thought about this month, I'll go through the pages and explain a little bit more. So if you're actually interested in a deeper dive of the first week, which is ruby red, the second week, citrine yellow, and then the third week, sapphire blue, there are other videos, which I'll link them below this video, and you can kind of look at those in a little bit of a closer way where I show process videos for a lot of them. As I got to the end, I actually didn't film process videos for a lot of these because I really just wanted to sit down and create. And so I don't actually have anything to show for the process there. But one thing I did want to say about doing this sketchbook compared to last year's, which I'll show in just a second, is that this year's I felt a lot more playful. And I actually opened up new supplies, one of which are these wax pastels that are water soluble, which I also swatched, and I'll link that video here. But because of these new supplies, I really feel like they inspired me to experiment and try, and the materials themselves actually influence the work, right? Which makes sense. It sounds so obvious. But because I'm using wax pastel crayons, like for the cover here, which I did at the very end of the month, it's just a lot more thick. It's not as refined, it's not tiny, it's just the lines are thicker, you're using a blunt tip, and I really feel like it just creates bigger strokes, bigger marks, and perhaps inspires me to be a little bit more bold. So when I started the month, it was actually me coming out of a creative break. I had taken a whole month off, I didn't do any creating, and I always gravitate towards making marks. Feels a little bit, you know, like I'm just trying to get into it. And you could see the strokes are a little bit more, maybe timid, smaller, more refined, more detailed. And then I start to get a little bit more experimental, I think, as the month goes on and as the colors start changing. And so I feel like this really gives me an opportunity to play. So I can play from doing abstracts to doing, you know, flowers, to doing just patterns and marks, and even swatching colors. I really loved Artful August for this because I really think it helped me play and get back into it. So I was able to do things like experiment with gouache as well, and then just make really abstract, simple pieces. And as well as do things that are more literal, but just just have a lot more fun with it. Like this is with gouache and I used it really thick. And I also combined it with the water-soluble wax pastel. This one was really interesting because I was using gouache, but then I started to lift and I was able to get some highlights, and that was also an interesting discovery. I feel like everything that we do, we discover new things. A lot of times I would return to something that's simple if I didn't have that much time that day, and then it's still being able to see the beauty and being able to capture things without that many marks, and to be okay with leaving things minimal. This was also a return to something that I hadn't done in a while, which was ink and wash. And so you can see that when I'm using a finer medium, like an ink and pencil lines, the work is just more delicate and lighter. And when I'm using things like even watercolor or water-soluble wax pastels here for the butterfly, it's just a lot more rough, I guess, is the way I would say. And that's okay. I think that it's really interesting to see the changes. This one, I really just wanted to let my son play with me. We did masking fluid and salt and some Brusho sprinkled about, and it was just fun for him. We used monster trucks to do this. So these are their tire tracks, and I had him, you know, just drive his cars on here, and it was fun. This one, I was playing with more masking fluid, tried to do like a lightning sky, and it turned out okay, but I wasn't super happy with it. And I think doing things like all of these others would lead to experiments like this, where I allow the next piece to overlap the first piece. And there's something about this that was nice for me to do. It was fun, and I saw that the pastel could cover some of the watercolor. I think there's this opacity that I'm not used to having when I use watercolors all the time. And using a wax pastel that's water soluble gives me opacity and layer and texture, and that's been so much fun to play with. And like I said, I did this cover at the very end after the entire month was over. Definitely played with this one. Not very planned out, kind of rough, maybe a little too playful. But I think that's the point of this. If you compare this to my 2022, you can see a pretty big difference between maybe the approach that I had last year. I'll do a quick flip through of this one. A lot of the lines are more delicate. I used a lot more watercolor and a lot more pencil graphite lines, and so everything is a little bit more lighter. My yellows were a lot more lemony because the color here was really yellow. It wasn't specifically citrine yellow, it was just yellow. So I feel like it evokes different things in our minds when we're told certain colors. So I did get a little bit warmer towards the end, and perhaps I've discovered then that I liked warmer yellows, and maybe that's what made me gravitate towards warmer yellows this year. I've got a blue. This is a lot more navy than it is ultramarine. It's lighter. I still did ink and wash. I think that it's just really, really nice to be able to look back and see the work that I did a year ago and how it's differed a little bit. And it's still somehow me, but it's just me using different mediums perhaps. But this was Artful August last year, and even the way I use my books was different, but what I really love so far is how I've been able to finish an entire sketchbook. So I made both of these, and I feel like it gives me the freedom to play because they aren't bound, they aren't purchased, and I think that it's such a beautiful thing to be able to do. So hopefully you enjoyed this short tour, and like I said, I'll link the other Artful August videos below in the description box, so you can check them out if you'd like a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the other entries that are shown here. And please do let me know if you have any questions below in the comments, and I'll answer them as best as I can. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.